He said, Dad, every kid you see from here on out will remind you of me. That's my gift to you. Treat them like your son. Treat them like your daughter. Make everybody better. And now that this happened to you, you can help other people that may go through this. I'm going to give you the gift of this strange foresight where you can see pain in a way that other people can't. And the only way I can do that, Dad, is by putting you through the worst possible pain. That is the terror before the Satan.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations. Today, we have George Monty in the house. Welcome.
Aloha, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. What an amazing time to be connecting. And thank you for creating some time and space to share with us your wisdom. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I think it's such an exciting time for us to be here, to get to just see this sort of awakening that's happening and this sort of transition that we're all a part of, whether you're conscious about it or not. I think everybody is playing a part in the world moving into a better space. So it's such a beautiful time. I agree.
Yeah, fully. I'm on board with that. So just to give a bit more background and context to our listeners, I'd like to say a few things about you, George, if that's okay. So, George, you are a father, author, explorer, and podcaster. I think you have one of the best psychedelic podcasts I ever come across, true life podcast. So I think that's a wonderful mission project. And this is one of the reasons I really wanted to speak with you. Thank you for everything you're doing in this space.
The pleasure is all mine. It's such a labor of love, and I look at it as a huge learning experience. And I've gotten to speak with so many cool people like yourself, Dr. Rick Strassman, and just not only is it incredible to talk to some of the biggest names out there, but what I have learned is that it's amazing to talk to some of the people who are involved in the struggle of their life. Like I talked to this gentleman a while back who was leaving the church and he found psychedelics and he just talked about all this trauma that was happening in his life. And it's just such a profound time to be alive. And I think what you are doing, what I'm doing is just kind of being an empathic listener and giving people a platform to tell their stories. And in doing that, they can reach out to so many other people that are on that path. I get goosebumps when I think about it.
I love that. Thank you. And this kind of aligns with your mission, which is in your bio. You've always been very curious of the nature of relationships, psychedelics, and communication. I think you are really living up to that. So thank you. And your book, which I am super interested, The Terror Before the Sacred. When I saw that title, I had chills. It's almost like I know this, and really looking forward to dive into that. But before that, let's talk about your background, what brings you to here, and whatever feels right to comfortable to share.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for the question and thank you for all the kind words. I think that my path to psychedelics, like most people's, started off with a lot of childhood trauma. And for anybody who's really gone through the childhood trauma and started to do the work, you realize that it's not just you as the child. Like that trauma began generational. And so for me, my dad was bipolar. My parents got divorced at an early age. And, when you're a kid, you don't understand why your parents fight, or you don't understand why maybe I was molested when I was younger too. So I had all these things kind of hit me all at once, and I was living this life. But as a child, you don't really understand these things. You just go, oh, well, that's your uncle. I told you to stay away from him. You know what I mean? And when your parents are fighting, you don't get it. I moved probably 17 times in 17 years. My dad was one of the most charismatic, and still is one of the most charismatic and amazing people. And for anybody who knows someone who's bipolar, one moment you see this majestic individual where he was telling me these things like, oh, we're going to go to this ribbon cutting in Gibraltar, and I'm going to introduce you to the king. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe this is so amazing. And he could literally paint these pictures in your mind. And along with those pictures comes this feeling of exuberance. It's almost contagious when you meet somebody that has that sort of passion. And then that would be like for a month. And then for the next 3 months, my dad would just be out on the couch, like no working. People would come and shut off the power. Pretty soon the cops would show up and be like, hey, you guys haven't paid your rent. You have an hour to grab your stuff. And so that I began to see that as a pattern in my life. And I began to realize, hey, this isn't, not that there's a real definition of normal, but I realized that my life, the people in my life that I was surrounded by were different. And so that began to play out in my understanding of who I am. And that was one of the first foundations where I really began to do some digging into the world of relationships. Like, what's my relationship to my dad? What is my dad's relationship to the truth? What's my relationship to the truth? Why do some people see the world this way and some people see the world that way? So if I fast forward from, young George as a kid in primary school to, George, sort of a rebellious teenager, that was the first time I kind of came into contact with psilocybin mushrooms for the first time. And while I don't thoroughly remember everything that happened on the trip, I do remember beyond a shadow of a doubt this feeling of knowing. And it was the first time in my life that things made sense to me. It was almost the first time I came into contact with my authentic self. And it was just such this overwhelming feeling. I think I'll use the word joy, because it was like, wow, I get it. I get it. There's a beauty about the chaos that is in my life. And that is the first time I also kind of felt that terror before the sacred, which would come back later in my life. But I guess that is my first entrance into the world of psychedelics. And I think a lot of people have similar stories where they found themselves in crisis. They found themselves in a world that didn't make sense. They stumbled upon two psychedelics, or maybe they were called to psychedelics, or maybe it was this experimentation. But that was the first time for me, my introduction into psychedelics.
That is so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Did it feel like it was like almost like a homecoming? A lot of people say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to think about that word for a minute.
Yeah.
When I think of homecoming, I think of the prodigal son, how he comes back to his father. And I like that term. I've never heard that before, but yeah, I guess in a way it was a homecoming. It was a, I would say instead of a homecoming for me, it was more of a revealing to me. It was more of a revealing sensation. Like I was revealed to myself, and I didn't feel like as I was at a place. So it wasn't like I was coming home, but for me, it was like something was revealed to me. So I would go with more of like I guess almost like a revelation. That's a great way to describe it, though. Homecoming. Did it feel like a homecoming for you?
A lot of people I speak to, they say that. And they say, oh, I know this place. I recognize this place. It's almost like a reconnection, that feeling. I think homecoming in terms of, suddenly you're ripped into being alive again, and you're in your body, you're in your senses, you're in the present moment for the first time. So in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of, it seems to me, at least the schools that I went to, and I think a lot of people in the Western world are conditioned to think that you come into this world. But it seems to me psychedelics have shown me that you come out of this world. You're part of this world, the same way that a apple tree grows apples, the earth grows people. And I think once you begin to see that perspective, then you really begin to understand how to maneuver in your environment. Like it's something that you should work with instead of trying to conquer. And when you do that, you begin to see the changes in your life. It's a pretty profound way to re-examine your life, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So my understanding is that when you grow up in a household, you have somebody who is quite severely experiencing challenges in that way. It kind of creates the template for the child. Do you think did that confuse you? Did some of these tendencies become your own without realizing? How much of this was internalized by you?
That's a great question. I went to therapy later in life, and I realized that, you are a series of patterns. And I despise labels. And when I think of language, like sometimes we use labels, and labels come with stigma. So if I say, oh, I have a mental disorder, my dad has a mental disorder, it almost is something that puts you in a category where you're disabled. And on some levels, I think we all have a label. Everybody can have this debilitating label or something like that. But I did find that the patterns my dad has are something that runs in my family. I tend to be pulled far out into this world close to the sun. My sister does it. And on some levels, it has given me an insight into the way I see the world. And in a weird sort of way, it's given me an insight into the way everyone else sees the world. And what I mean by that is, when you're different, people look at you different. And sometimes people say things about you. But if you can see everybody around you as a mirror, they're just reflecting back to you their thoughts about you. And if you can really define that, if you can really be honest with yourself and you see the way people look at you, then you understand how you look at yourself. I'll give you an example of what I mean. In my life, I tend to be either super excited and everything is possible, or like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, I can't do it. So I do have those same tendencies as my father. But for me, what I have learned looking at people, because of looking at life like that, I can see somebody, a total stranger, and I can look at them with the same skills I look at myself. I can be like, wow, this person over here, they are one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life. And you know what they would be really good at? This person would probably be a really good therapist for people with ADHD, because I can see the way this person is focusing on that person's words. So the ability to, whatever your disability is, maybe it's your superpower. Because if you're way out and you can see the beauty in people that no one else can, then you can reflect it back to that person. And when you do that, that person will be so inspired that you found this little nugget of truth about them that maybe they didn't know about themselves. But on the flip side of that too, when I was a lot younger, sometimes in a down cycle, like I would see all the negative in people, and I would use that particular method of seeing things to hurt people, and I just realized that those were just things that happened to me. And if I reflect it back in sort of a meta vision, my dad did that to me. He could find the smallest spark of creativity and blow on it, and a fire would erupt. And in the same ways, I could be doing something that I thought was regular, and he would see the downside of it and just snuff that fire completely out. And so if I look at that from a generational point of view, how I've tried to incorporate that into my life is that, okay, I have a tendency to have these patterns. So if I'm going to be on a way up cycle, I should write down all the thoughts that I have that are positive, not only about me, but about the other people. And then I can use those notes when I'm down to kind of bring me back up to a level that is not something where I'm laying on the couch or I'm debilitated like that. And so I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's kind of where I was going to.
That's wonderful. That what I'm hearing is someone who made the switch. Before the switch, we continually focusing on the lack, the negativity, pointing out what is not, good enough. And then we make the switch and we realize the beauty in people's lack. Because I always talk about this metaphor. I have a dear friend once, he said, we are all born with a medicine pouch. And he said, what's in your pouch? What's in your medicine pouch? And this speaks to what you said about the disability or the challenge the person is experiencing after the switch becomes their superpower. Right? Again, like another author that I love, once he said, your greatest gifts lie alongside your deepest wounds. It's very powerful. And I think the more we speak to this, the more we can emphasize and reinforce that we are all maybe algorithmically, right, wired in that way that we ought to bring out the best in the worst. So it's kind of like the physical laws or the physical bound, we're bound in these physical laws, right? It's like coherence, chaos before coherence and things like that. So it kind of, once we make that switch, everything changes. So I hear that from your voice.
Yeah, thank you. I heard another great quote that I like to tell myself sometimes, and that's the only way to really bring about peace is to embrace the suffering. And it's so hard to do. And I sometimes think that that's why we're here, is to get enough suffering so that we learn to embrace. You got to learn to love the suffering, because you have to understand that is the one thing that gives you the catalyst to become the best version of yourself. And not only that, it gives you the ability to see the suffering in others. And I think that is like one of the most tremendous gifts that a person can have. And the only way you get it is to go through the suffering. The bigger the fall, the worse the cut, the deeper the cut, the better the chance of growing into the person you're supposed to be. Like the cut, the pain, the suffering is necessary. And I think on the flip side of suffering is surrender. It's the only way. I know it's so hard. It makes me want to cry when I think about some of the people I love and what they have to go through and what they're going through. And if anybody's listening to this and you're going through something right now, first off, let me just tell you, my heart breaks for you, but I'm super excited for you. Because yeah, I know it sucks. I'm sorry you lost your kid. I'm sorry you lost your dad. I'm sorry that relationship's wrong. I'm sorry you lost your job. But guess what? It's necessary. It's all necessary. Find that small spark of fire and blow on it, because you are about to become bigger and better than you've ever have in your life. And going through these tragedies is what allows you to be an example for other people. And that's part of the switch, and it's going to happen to you, So I just, anybody listening, I got good news and bad news for you. The good news is that you're going to become better. The bad news is you're going to go through a horrible tragedy to get there. It's so true.
Absolutely. It's almost like, the saying, the contrast is the contrast that opens up and unlocks our inner resources. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. George, so tell me about your book, The Terror Before the Sacred. What does it mean? And how did it all come up? And, how did it become, come into the being?
Well, first off, thank you for asking me. For me, The Terror Before the Sacred is a book about integrating tragedy. And the title, The Terror Before the Sacred, is sort of a nod to Mircea Eliade, who talks about he has a book called The Sacred and the Profane. And in that book, he talks about coming into contact with something that is almost angelic in nature. And you think back to the prophets, or you think back to Rumi, some of the Sufi poetry and the way in which they try to describe the eternal moment. And imagine being in the presence of something so beautiful, so divine, that you're paralyzed with fear. Sometimes people at a really heightened state of awareness feel like they're paralyzed, but it's this overwhelming sensation that's mixed of beauty and fear, like a sort of, divine cocktail. Being in the presence of God himself, whatever your definition of God is that is the terror before the sacred, because there's no words to describe it. It's so powerful and beautiful. It could kill you and it could love you at the same time. And sometimes we get a glimpse of that. For me, the book began when my son was born. My son Ocean was born, and I'll tell you the story that kind of introduced me to the terror before the sacred. I was 39 years old, and my wife and I had been married for about 2 years. And we had, first off, if you're going to have a kid, you're never ready. You should just do it. And so we were getting ready, and we went to, we got pregnant, and then we started going to like the Lamaze class, and everything was going awesome. And for those who have gone through a pregnancy, your first one, all of them are awesome, but your first one is really special because it's this first time you and your partner are going through this thing together, and there's a new life, and you go and you you go to an ultrasound. And for my wife and I, we decided not to know the sex of the baby. We were going to have a surprise, it was going to be beautiful. We're going to share this thing. And so we would go there, and during the pregnancy, we would have this banter. I'd be like, oh, it's going to be a little boy. My wife's like, no, it's a little girl, and I would feel the kick count, and 9 months came. And so we're waiting. The bag is packed. It's in the car. And, we had gone to Lamaze because we had done everything we needed to do. We were ready. And my wife says to me one day, we're out at lunch. She goes, George, we need to go to the hospital. And I go, okay. I didn't see your water break. Shouldn't your water break? And she goes, well, I just feel like there's something, George. So we jump in the car. And at that moment, it became a tense moment because there was a problem. And then I didn't know what it was, but you can see the look of passion, or the look of despair, a passionate despair on her face when I saw her. And there was a quietness that was, you could have heard a pin drop. It was just this eerie silence the whole way down to the hospital. And we get there and we go into the emergency room, and they see that my wife's pregnant, and they go, my wife says, look, there's some sort of a problem. I can feel it. And so, she's doing the kick, she's trying to do a kick count, and she feels like a little bit of movement, but not much. And I'm trying to feel, and they rush us up to the delivery room. And within a matter of seconds, there's a team of doctors around my wife and I, and they hook up the ultrasound. And for those who there's this terror before the sacred. There's a life that's part of my wife and I that's ready to be born, but there's a problem. And the ultrasound is hooked up to my wife's stomach. And I'm looking at the doctor, the ultrasound, my wife, the doctor, the ultrasound, my wife. And it's, for someone who's had an incredible psychedelic experience, you may be familiar with how time is just a construct. And this was the only time in which I've felt there is no time. And these 3 seconds where I'm staring at the doctor, my wife, the ultrasound, it felt like a year. And then the doctor just turns to me, and in a slow motion voice, he says, I'm sorry, your child has passed away. And at that moment, all the air just comes out of the room. And I stand there for, what seems like an hour, but it's only a few seconds. I'm looking at the tears in my wife's eyes beginning to form. I can see the reflection of my tears forming. The doctor takes me and says, George, I need to talk to you outside. And he says, George, I can't imagine. I'm very sorry, but you're going to have to start making some difficult decisions. And I'm like, what is this guy talking about? I'm going to have to start what do you mean I'm going to make a decision? And it was surreal. The words that came out of his mouth, it was psychedelic in a way. It was like the sound of a helicopter coming from a hummingbird. I could hear the sound. I knew he was saying things, but I didn't understand how this was possible. And he paused for a minute, and he says, your wife's going to need to deliver the baby. The contractions are probably going to start pretty soon. So I'm going to give you and your wife some time. And I remember going back in and just my wife and I just crying, and just trying to make sense of this thing. And then all of a sudden the contractions start, and my wife starts feeling this pain. And all of a sudden the miracle of childbirth begins to happen. And the instincts kick in. I'm holding her hand. I'm counting like the Lamaze class told us to. And for a moment, as the baby is breaching, I see ahead. And for those who have seen childbirth for the first time, it's so freaking amazing. It's a miracle. And I'm watching my child being born, but simultaneously knowing that there's no life in his body or their body. And as the baby is born, the nurse pulls the baby. It's like, it's a boy. And I have this feeling of oh, I knew it was a boy. And it was I know it's a boy. I just start bawling, crying. And my wife is crying, and they're like, do you want to hold your child? And for a moment, we're like, no, we don't. Our baby's dead. And then the emotion rolls over us like a tidal wave. We're like, yeah, of course we want to hold our son. What the hell are we thinking? And then you feel guilty for not wanting to for a minute. And we hold our son for as long as they let us. And then the doctors come in and they tell you, look, we have to take your son away. And so that to me was an event. That was the terror before the sacred, to see the thing that you love the most ripped away from you before you even had a chance, before he ever had a chance to get to be with you, for you to get to throw him a baseball or teach him to surf or to have an argument with him. You know what I mean? None of that. It all ripped away from you. And so it is the greatest tragedy that my wife and I have ever endured. But it is also the greatest gift. And I know some people, I've told this story and people are like, what are you talking about? How can that be a gift, George? For me, I made a lot of promises that day when I held my son Ocean in my arms. And even though he died that day, I made a promise to him that every kid I see will be my son, will be my daughter. And every kid I get to see reminds me of my son, even though I never got to spend time with him. Like, well, that was one of the promises he made to me and I made to him, is that he said, Dad, every kid you see from here on out will remind you of me. That's my gift to you. Treat them like your son, treat them like your daughter, make everybody better. And now that this happened to you, you can help other people that may go through this. I'm going to give you the gift of this strange foresight where you can see pain in a way that other people can't. And the only way I can do that, Dad, is by putting you through the worst possible pain. That is the terror before the sacred. And that story I recount in my book in a similar fashion. And that's kind of how the journey that I'm on now began. Like, I started the book with the story, and that story allowed me to see the world in a way that I never have before. It allowed my relationships with my wife and my daughter to flourish in a way it never had before. Part of me died that day, and for a long time, nothing grew back. But at one point, something began to grow back, and something so beautiful and so passionate and such a gift that, you know, it's interesting. It's recounted in so many mythological stories where a father loses a son, whether it's Abraham or whether it's, you know, some of the Greek tragedies. And I feel like all those stories were written for me. I feel like all those myths and all those stories that I'm a continuation of. But with those stories, if you go back and you read those stories, come great responsibility. You know, this thing was a blessing and a curse. And so that is the foundation of terror before the sacred. And it gets into some philosophies of life. It gets into the ideas that, you know, maybe instead of a systematic approach to education, maybe instead of people going and being trained like Pavlovian dogs in schools with whistles and authority, maybe we can learn more from a waterfall. Maybe you can learn more from lived experience. And you should be seeking out the teachers instead of going and being sat in front of a classroom of people that may or may not care about you. So the book is about transformation. The book is about tragedy. And the book is about how tragedy is something that is a gift. And even the worst tragedies, you can fall in love with them. So it's sort of a love story, I guess.
Wow.
Thanks for letting me share that. It's a tough one to share.
I can't even comprehend.
Yeah, it makes me want to cry, but they're tears of joy. Like it's I know that sounds crazy. I don't wish it on anybody. It's part of a club that I don't want anybody to ever join. But I open you with open arms to everybody. And I feel it, man. I feel that's why I do the podcast. Like that's why I love psychedelics. Psychedelics help me integrate that. And like that's the PTSD. That's the pain. But it's necessary. Without that, I wouldn't be able to talk to the people that I talk to. Without that gift, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be able to help people. I wouldn't be able to see the world as clearly. I would still be clouded by this scientific materialism or these silly ideas that what you have is what makes you a person. Like, none of that's true. None of it's true. And it's so hard to have those scales ripped from your eyes, but I would never want to go back to that. And I want to help people that are in it, that are going through it or may go through it, because that's why we're here, I think. That's why we're here.
I have so much respect for you. It's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
It's like cosmic level of awakening.
Yeah, and there's so much. I know there's people that like they go through way more than that. Mine is just mine is my story, and yeah, I don't know. It's still, I still integrate it from time to time. It's still powerful. I still love it.
Yeah, it's almost like the volcanic force of power behind you. Yeah, it's like your ultimate accountability in being a good person.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I don't have a choice anymore.
Incredible accountability. Wow, it's very powerful, George. And I think this is a great message for everyone who had a loss, and they've lost anyone, let alone a child. And I think your energy is very inspiring and hopeful. And I know it's going to motivate a lot of people and give comfort, because somehow in this society, we don't know how to be with pain and grief. We don't know how to touch grief. It's the one that robs us from understanding what this life is. We've all almost desensitized ourselves from death. It's almost like a dream, a false imagination, or that doesn't happen. It feels so far away, yet it's so closer than our breath. Yeah, that's what I hear.
It's the one thing that unites us. It's that shared sacrifice. And it's the one thing we can all rally around each other for. It's this idea of death that people are so afraid of. And it can be, or it seems to me that over the last maybe 50 or 20 years, like this world of division that we find ourselves in is just so silly to me. Like we're all hurting. We're all going through tragedy. Why are we fighting each other? Like, listen, man, there's such a better way to go about it. And I think this is a big part of what the psychedelics are doing, be them entheogens or be them psychedelic medicine. There's so many people that have a similar story to mine, to yours, or everybody has a story. And it's embracing the most difficult parts of that story that allow you to become your authentic self. It's embracing that self-discovery that will give you the antidote to the fear. And I see it happening. Like I see so much of the psychedelic community coming together, and I'm for all of it. I'm for the optimization. I'm for the coaching. I'm for all of it. Like, I think that we need all of it, because everyone's story, everyone's song is going to attract someone else. And we need everyone singing in unison. And so, I know that there's some divisions that are happening through, and some are worth talking about. I think that's how things get better, but I'm for all of them. I see the conscious awakening that is happening. And I think it's going to touch everybody. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for spearheading this space in that way. Yeah. So coming back to your conversations on podcast, what are you learning? And I love your approach and your questions and your conversation style. I think you honor everyone. I think you really give them the space and you really honor everyone. It's very unique. It's very unique. And you always let them speak their message. I think it's very unique. Yeah. So what are you learning? What's shifting in you? What are you observing in the current wave of psychedelics?
So I see, what I have learned is that everyone has been inflicted with fear. And it's this fear that has been dividing us. And so when I get to talk to people, like, I take a lot of time. If you're going to come on my show, I'm going to research you. I want to bring out to the audience what I see in you, because it's worthwhile. Everyone's story is unique in a way. And sometimes we have trouble telling our own unique story. So you need someone there that can ask you the questions about your uniqueness. And that's what I strive to do. And in doing that, I learn that everyone does something. They have a reason to do it, you know. And if you listen to someone, even that you may disagree with, if you talk to someone that is maybe, you know, there's a lot of people that talk about the magnetic crane. I think it's called TMS, I forgot exactly, TMT or something like that. And there's a lot of people like, oh, I don't know if that particular therapy, transcranial magnet, something like that. And I spoke to the gentleman from Ben Gurion Lab about it, and he's just so inspiring. Like, he came up and he talked about how he created this research and what it's done. And I wanted people to see the guy that created it, because it's a pretty amazing therapy, even though there's a lot of pushback. People say, oh, this or that. I don't know. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I want people's story to be out there. So what I have learned is that everybody is worthy of coming on and explaining their story. When it comes to this psychedelic space, I've seen an explosion in integration. And I'm learning a lot about what integration is. I'm learning about the different modalities in which people integrate. And I'm learning, and every time I learn about someone's story, it's like I get to take a piece of their story and use it in my life. So in some ways, I feel like I'm the student that gets a one-on-one conversation with the master with every single interview that I have. I'm like, I can't believe I get to participate in this person's dream. And I'm so thankful that they get to participate in my dream a little bit. But I see it moving. And if I look at the psychedelic space from maybe the 100-foot view or the 1,000-foot view, what I see is us moving from a world of healing. Like right now, the narrative is all about healing. It's all about a clinical approach. It's about trying to get people that can't afford it the necessary tools to help them in healing. But I see that quickly moving from healing to optimization. And I would challenge everyone to think about those two words for a minute. Like, what is the difference between healing and optimization? I think that healing is a form of optimization. And I think that this psychedelic space is having so much transformation. It's going to fundamentally change the way we look at medicine. For a long time, the medical model has been to study people that are sick. But what do you learn from studying people that are sick? Well, you may learn how to work on some of their ailments. You may learn how to get them onto a methodology that can help them. But I think that where we're going to go from healing to optimization is starting to study the people that are really working at a level that is higher than everybody else. And once you begin studying that, then you can go back and use the tool of integration to help the people that are healing become truly optimized. And I think that psychedelics are sort of a Trojan horse that has found its way into the medical system. And it's going to heal the medical system the same way it heals people with PTSD. It's going to heal the roots of addiction the same way it heals people with TBI. And so I'm so thankful to see that. And I can see the pieces because I'm getting this giant look at them. I'm interviewing so many people, and I feel like, oh, this is a corner piece to the puzzle. That goes here. Oh, that's the head. I'm going to put the head right there. So I feel like you and I, who get to be in this incredible spot, we're getting to see the puzzle pieces as they're being put together. And I see it move. I see it fundamentally changing the medical model. Do you see it changing that way?
I love this. Yeah. These are the conversations that I'm always having. And it's almost like, and I love your approach about like, it's almost like there's no judgment here. It's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
Every human is unique. Like billions of people, we're all unique in the way we understand, the way we integrate, the way we heal, the way we attract to certain modalities. So it's like all hands on deck. And this is what I see. And bringing that richness, having all these conversations with different people, all walks of life, who created a new way of looking at the world through their story, like you. I think this is the medicine pouch. Although it might look like entrepreneurship, therapy, clinical model, medical model, shamanic, doesn't matter. It looks on the surface like some model, some approach, but it reminds me of the, metaphorically speaking, like olden days, in olden days, there would be a fireside chats, elders would start having these conversations, the younger ones would listen and learn. I feel like we are the elders on the podcast. Like these podcasts, these conversations is literally the same thing of in the past, like creating wisdom of lineage, and passing it and paying it forward. That's how I see it. And it's all sacred.
Yeah, I love every second of that. And there's something to be said about a host. If you just think about the word host. I often have a podcast with Dr. Jessica Rochester, and she's just so beautiful with her language. And when we talk about lineages, and I learned so much from so many people, but I bring her up because she bestowed me with this title of host. And I just thought, like, wow, that's so amazing to have someone that has been through so much, giving me this title of host. And she explained to me what a host is. And, there's different types of roles, and we all play them. And like, I just wear the badge of storyteller or host with just such honor. I feel so thankful to get to be in this position, and just to think that the stories we highlight or the message we amplify could reach somebody in their darkest moment. And I know that because it's happened to me. I remember being in the car with my dad and listening to like some AM radio program, and just some random guy came on, and all I heard was some flowery rhetoric about seeing the world in a new way. And for me, like, that little line was enough to get me thinking about things or wanting to read a new book. And I think it's important for us to be careful with our words as well, because when you're in this position, your words are very powerful. And maybe not just our position, maybe in all relationships, you should be very careful with the words you choose, because they hold power. They hold responsibility. They hold passion. They hold fire. And if you choose your words wisely, then you can be the fire that lights someone's dreams on fire. Like, you can help people with your words or your absence of words. Just listening to people sometimes makes you the greatest host in the world, And I think that that's another thing about podcasting. You really learn to listen, because you're looking at someone's eyes, you're watching their mouth move, you're waiting for a pause, you're doing your best to see their ideas emerge. And when you do that, you have to listen with all of your senses. You really have to focus. And I think we've lost that a little bit. And this is a way to reintroduce it.
Absolutely. And that's what helps us grow, right?
Yes.
The listening is what helps us grow. And yeah, I cannot agree more. And I just want to touch on something you earlier first started saying about having these conversations with the master. I think that's a very powerful thing to say. Seeing everyone as a master. There is a saying in the wisdom traditions: the moment we start criticizing, we stop learning and we stop growing. It's like, and when we start especially seeing other people inferior and judging and criticizing, we stop learning and we stop growing. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it has a lot to do with conditioning. I think that most people, at least in the West, have gone to school to learn in a systematic form. We've gone and we've learned from people's experiences. They tell a story about something. You learn a story about history. Think about the word history, his story. Like, it's just his story. When we start breaking down the etymology of it, you're like, wow, that word doesn't, kind of suspect right there. And if you look back to the ways in which people used to learn, it used to be a young person was brought before the masters and they would think, who is this young wizard? Or who is this young woman here? What are her magical gifts? What makes her unique? And it would put this person in a position where they would be forced to seek out their uniqueness. What is your unique gift? And it's such a better way for a child to grow up trying to find what it is about them that's the miracle inside them. What gift did God bestow upon you, you young individual of so much power? Like, it's so much better than like, okay, you could be a truck driver, you could be a doctor, or you could be a lawyer. Doctors here, lawyers over here. What did your parents do? Okay, you're going to be over there. So the systematic approach, while maybe having its place in the world of economics, and I'm sure that the road to hell was paved with good intentions, but that systematic approach is slowly breaking down and giving back the freedom for people to learn from lived experience. And we're seeing rituals reawaken. We're seeing rites of passage, these echoes growing louder and louder. And I just see this new world emerging, and it's all around us. And I don't think there's any way that the high energy resource extraction and the commodification of abstract ideas and these things like commercial paper or credit default swaps or too big to fail, like these things can't go on. Like they're being blown away like the embers of an old fire. And in those ashes is this new world being built. Out of chaos comes creativity. And so I just see that old model moving away, and the system in which we toiled under is being broken down. And I want everyone listening to this to know something. If you're alive right now, then you are part of the builders who will build tomorrow, and you can build it better for everyone. If you're alive right now, if you're listening to this, if you're not listening to this, if you're alive right now, then you're a builder of the future. Act responsibly, build a better tomorrow. And maybe that building a better tomorrow starts with you waking up and going for a walk. Maybe it starts with you saying a kind word to everybody you meet. Maybe the building of a better tomorrow starts with you noticing the beauty around you. Whatever small thing you think it is, it's just the first step in a journey that builds the world anew, and everyone's responsible for it. And you can do it, and you should do it, and you'll enjoy creating it, and your life will be better if you just take that first step. Just begin noticing how beautiful the world around you is. And if you can do that, a light will begin to shine in you that will draw people towards you. It'll bring the necessary things you need into your life. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
I love that. I love that. Building micro habits for macro impacts. I love that. Starts with you. This is so powerful. And it kind of helps us escape from the shackles of the conditioning that everything needs to be bigger and better and faster and quicker and stronger. I mean, this is what's been the detriment of the Western model so far. Now we're going back to the stripping away to the minimal, the simple, the basic. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Susan. I heard this quote. I would love to get your opinion on it. The quote is, in life, it's not about getting things. It's about getting rid of things. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. My mantra. I've been on the minimalist journey for a while now. My God, George, I cannot tell you. It's like 3-4 years and I'm still healing down. It's incredible how much we accumulate, gather and hold and hoard, and it's incredible once you start to see it, and how much time it takes to peel away to come to that simplicity. But it's worth it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard to peel that stuff away? Like, is it just like paint that's dried on there? Like, why is it so hard to let go of things sometimes?
Yeah, a fear, like you said. One is the fear. is an existential fear, trying to fill in that existential fear hole with things, material stuff that can touch and make you feel comfortable. I think it's comforting for a lot of people. It keeps them more in touch with this physical. There are reasons. I mean, I'm not judging, because sometimes people need that.
Yeah.
Soothing, but then it's better if we can quickly understand this and then start reversing the process as soon as possible. It helps for a while, but then it's not the thing, for sure.
Yeah. That kind of brings up this topic of integration. And I was having an interesting conversation with a friend of mine a while back, and we were talking about integration. And, I realized that a lot of people, like, integration is a very important part of a psychedelic trip. It helps you make sense of the world. But I find like there's a weird sort of paradox in there. And I'm curious to get your ideas. But it seems with like a facilitator or someone that's helping you integrate, there's a lot of priming that goes on there. And like sometimes it feels to me like the facilitator is the person that's rewiring the individual who has the trauma. I'm having trouble trying to figure out like that particular situation, because on some level I think, wow, the person that does that, they should be really educated and skilled and understand what they're doing. And then on the other part of me is like, maybe anybody can do it. What do you think?
Oh, I love this question. So integration is an art form. It's an art form, and the facilitator needs to know and do and be in their process simultaneously, because it's an art form. It requires deeper connection. If we can deeply connect with ourselves, guess what? It's effortless to connect with the other, just like you're doing. You go through your own healing process. It's easier. I think it's definitely an art form. And going back to the wisdom traditions, that would be necessary for, probably they will see as a mentorship. It's actually not integration with a therapist or a facilitator or a shaman. It's actually a mentor and apprentice going through the journey, walking the path together and weaving an art form. That's how I see it. It is absolutely that. It's rewiring, learning, unlearning. It's that ultimate process of bringing the person to coherence and in alignment, so that they can activate their own inner resources and become self-agent. That's the goal.
Do you see an issue then with like so many schools starting to pop up and like people offering certificates? In some ways it seems like we're right back to the systematic approach that I was talking about. All of a sudden, I was talking to someone whom I have a lot of respect for, and she was in South Africa and she was holding space for people and serving medicine. And the people were like, where's your degree? And she's like, she sat down and she explained to them that she studied this for a really long time, but the people were like, well, where's your degree? And so it's sometimes I wonder when I see the schools pop up or I talk to people, I'm like, wow, are we losing something in translation already?
I think so. It's coming back to what you said about the systematic Western model of commodifying, capitalizing, moving away from the essence of what this is. For me, psychedelic work has always been a mediator. Medicine is the mediator between the apprentice and the mentor. And it's a dance between, it's an art form. It's a beautiful, like, I go back to the wisdom traditions. I have so much respect. One of my online mentors, like I listened in the beginning of my journey, was Caroline Myss. And she gets really angry. She's known to be so abrasive. So she's not everyone's cup of tea. But then it's about hearing the right thing, right? It's about not judging, but just hearing what she's saying. And one of the things she said that really cemented what I believed this was, she said, back in her time, she was in a Catholic school with nuns, and she already saw a lineage of this wisdom. So the older nun would then take care of the younger, and then there will be a time, a space for the younger one to go into that apprentice process, and then the older nun would decide when the younger one should ask the question, who am I? They weren't even allowed. She has a really beautiful way of putting this together, but I'm just paraphrasing. What I understood was exactly that. It's not about accessing the information too quick, too fast, but it's about willingness to be a student, being an apprentice, even in the self-help, healing, self-development, transformation. I believe it's a apprenticeship, because you're not just, because our templates are so deeply wired. It's not like I'll wake up this morning and I decide I will transform. No, it's an art form. There is a sacredness in that. So there has to be some patience, some devotion, some commitment, all of these beautiful things that we lost, but we can bring it back with these conversations. We can bring more attention to these. But you're right. We are missing. It's being taken out of context. But we'll just keep talking in this way, and then those who resonate will resonate. But yeah, this is how I think. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I've noticed a sort of, I hear people describe them as program protocols. And I think to myself, like, it seems like a lot of retreats have the same program protocols. And it's almost like, like fast food in a way. Like you can get this, it's all part of like a menu. You know what I mean? And it's just, you can see that it's set up that way because it's economically beneficial. Okay, you're going to come down for a 7-day retreat. We're going to do one small dose here. We're going to do a bigger dose, and then you're going to get integration on your way out. And it's just like bing, bing, bing. And that makes sense of an economic model. It makes sense of a systematic approach. But when you start looking back at rites of passage, or it's a way of life, and it is a mentor-mentee relationship, it does sort of, cherry pick the spiritual ideals that people want to embrace and pretends to give it to them. And maybe I shouldn't say pretend, maybe it does. I mean, there's no shortage of transformational stories that are coming out of places of people that need help. And like, this is where I am on some, I'm for the people getting help, but I do think it's imperative to keep an eye on the commercialization aspect of it, because I think that it's a slippery slope. A disassociative could easily be used by a large corporation to make their people more productive, just as much as it can help people break free from tragedy. And I think that there's a real possibility there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like the example you shared earlier with children. Doctors are over here, truck drivers over here, dentists is over here, teachers are. It's the same thing. It's not looking at the individual person, what they need, but it's just kind of one thing fits all, which we all know we're not. We don't benefit like that. We are all individual. We have different needs, and we all come from different backgrounds, family dynamics. So we all have different unique needs. However, in the beginning, it might work. But I think, like you said, we have to be super aware of these things, make screen and make the right decisions in that direction, for sure.
With so many people that need help, though, like how do you fix that sort of paradox? There's all these people that need help, and if you were to rely on the traditional systems, like there's just not enough people to help. Like you don't thoroughly have someone who's been mentored for 20 years. Like that person can help a lot of people, but they can't help the millions of people that are currently suffering in our country. So is this quick fix something that is sort of a necessary patch?
I think, it's like every time we go through a breakthrough, there is some sort of like a chaos in it. There is some sort of, I spoke to a really lovely doctor, psychiatrist, and he said, I'm just worried they're going to make mess of this. I understand what it means, because, just like you said, there's so many people out there needing help real fast. But I think in this, we can all learn lessons, find our ways through this. I believe in human nature. I think we can come through this. I know it's going to look a bit messy and sort of disappointing and even cause harm in the beginning, but you know how it works, George. It's going to cause. Yeah, that's where we are. And look at you, so being curious. You can tell you're the host. We're like co-hosting this together. You're my guest, but we're co-hosting together. I love this energy. It is so compelling to just watch how curious you get and really, involved in these issues, like deeper issues, to help solve, bring ideas, inspire people, like plant seeds to have these conversations. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I enjoy learning and I enjoy talking to people. And I think it's interesting for two people that are hosts to get to maybe share some of what they learn. I do think it's a great connection. I love talking to you, Susan. You're an amazing person. I really love your insights. I love the fact that we share so many similar passions, but we still have different points of view. And, we should do some time. We should find contentious points and sit down together and talk them out. Like, even if it got to be a little bit more argumentative, I think that that's where people can really begin to learn and see things. So, and like I said, I love talking to you. I love learning. And I think it's so amazing. We're so far away, but yet we're still so close on so many levels. What have you learned most as a podcast host? Like, what are some of the things that you have really learned and embraced? Yeah,
I love that question. So what I've learned through this podcasting journey is, first of all, like you said, to listen. That's my personal learning. To listen and see the other person as the master, which I love that you said that word. You see them as the master talking and the student listening. And then on a larger context in the psychedelic sphere, I've learned that everybody is ultimately trying to do their best. It's all coming from a real deep, good intention, that sometimes it looks like causing more harm. But I am optimistic that we will go through this dark times at the moment, because we're still in the grips of the post-pandemic era. And I think we're going to walk this together, come together collectively. So I'm really optimistic. But like you said, along the way, there will be some tragedies, terrors, fears. Do you know my latest favorite quote?
I would love to hear it, please.
Oh gosh, I need to find it for you. It is so beautiful. It kind of like speaks to what we're going through right now. And here it goes. As the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born, now is the time of monsters. It's very powerful. Kind of sums up what we just touched on. And our job is to become aware of those monsters and self-correct within ourselves, and then collectively come together. Yeah, it's a metamorphosis. And I love the analogy to the old world dying. Just look at demographics. There's so many baby boomers. I think there's 10,000 baby boomers a day retiring. And if you think about the earth and the people on it as one organism, the same way a snake sheds its skin, so too are a large part of our community beginning to pass on. And what is the collective guilt? What is the collective pain? What is the collective unrealized dreams of the boomer generation doing? Sometimes I think that that's what we're going through. Is there's such a large portion of our family getting ready to die, whatever that means.
and this anxiety, this unsolved dreams, this anxiety, this for the kids of the people that are dying, for the people that are maybe finding themselves knocking on death's door and haven't solved the problem with their kid, or they never got to tell their nephew how much they love them and they're struggling with that. Like, I think that is what's manifesting these monsters out there. It's just these unrealized dreams that may go unrealized. And that's such a lesson for us to learn. Like, you are right. Like, this next generation moving forward is moving into the role of the world facilitator. The people that are middle-aged are moving into the role of the soon to be masters one day. And that's so much responsibility. There's so much for us to learn. Like, and meanwhile, here's this next generation coming up that's hungry to learn. And we don't have all the information yet. But if you just pan back, like, it stresses me out sometimes, but then I look back and I go, okay, this has been happening since time immemorial. It's a death and rebirth, not only for the people that may be passing on, but for us to have a new role, for the next generation to have a role. We're all beginning to take the next step, and the planet is going to look a lot different. It's time for new ideas, and people are worried about old institutions dying, but it's necessary. Sometimes you have to forget things so the next generation can rediscover them. And maybe they rediscover them in a way that is of untold beauty. And I'm sure it will be. I'm sure the next generation, I believe in their ability to imagine a world that is more beautiful than I can ever think of. And I trust that. I know that. And it's coming, and I can see it emerging, and I want to help facilitate it. I want to be the bridge between the people that I love that taught me and the people that are coming up. And I see you doing it, and I want to be part of it. And I feel that that's a role we can play and we can be good at.
Yeah, beautifully said. Just want to share something. I think you'd love this. So many years ago, I was part of a beautiful, expanding, growing online community. And my role was a coach. I was coaching in that company. And we used to take through, it was a self-development type of coaching. And we used to take so many students from all over the world. So we had, it was one of the first of the prototypes of these big online communities of self-development. So when, Zoom was still new and stuff like that. And we used to have lots of students globally enrolling, and then we would all have a graduation, meaning end of the program, just meet in person in London. And then at some point we started having all these people flying in, George, like 40, 50 people, only met online. But then this energy, when they see each other, it's like, wow, it's almost like they've known each other all their lives. And very quickly I realized this wasn't a coaching job. This was apprenticeship for me. I was the mentee, the student. And all these people we're supposed to be taking through a program to help them soon became the roles switched, and I started learning from them. And in one of those occasions, I met this wonderful woman from Australia. And at the time, I didn't really know what she was doing for work. And as in one of our strolls at one of these weekend graduations, I said, "What do you do for a living?" And she said, "I'm an event manager." I said, "That's interesting. You mean like you're booking VIPs, hotels?" She's like, No. She said, "I help organize people passing over in hospices." She called it event manager. That's the biggest event you can ever imagine in your life, the passing over. And she would be the first and the last one, and she would organize the family, because when
when families come and visit their elders passing, and these people would have like terminal illnesses, dying from cancer. Some of them would not have family to visit in their last moment. Some would have their children coming to say goodbye, and she would kind of arrange and organize this event where she would allow them come in and leave, and then, but always she would be the last one holding their hands as they close their eyes. And she told me this thing that still stays with me. I think it became my anchor in everything I do. It quickly brings me to my center and helps me realize what is important and priority. And she says, I hold their hand, and that last 10 seconds, the emotions they experience in that 10 seconds, a lifetime of regret, unlived dreams, the connections they didn't have. And then the tears fall down and they pass over. Like that 10 seconds of the last moment is a defining moment of how well life lived or not. So it just puts everything in perspective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, I've never, thank you for that. Like that is an incredible experience to even contemplate.
Yeah.
To be that close and to do it all the time, and to become familiar with what's happening there.
Yeah.
I don't think I could. I don't know anybody that could do that. Like that's so much.
It's next level capacity.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I think the sooner we learn at least some of that capacity, how to build some of that capacity, sooner we can bounce back and deal with our challenges in the world, instead of being stuck in this trauma obsession of being stuck in the old templates of manifestations of mental health challenges, not dismissing the detriment of it. But I think these are the kind of educations we need to help people start having a different perspective. And just like you said, seeing the world in a different way. These are the kind of conversations that will change the perspective really fast.
That should be integrated into the school system. Kids should see that, and I know that it's very difficult, but just that story will stay with me forever. Imagine some sort of a course where, you could call it the Course in Miracles, like the book, but, for a child to see the unrealized dreams of the father is something that could interrupt the pattern of generational trauma. And when I say it like that, that's how I broke it. I you see the unrealized dreams manifesting in yourself, and that is enough for you to begin to take steps to solve it. And if you don't, to everybody listening, or if you don't take the steps to solve what you know you need to, then your kid has to. So use that as the courage, as the fire, as the strength, as the praise, like as the motivation. I'm going to do this so my kid doesn't have to, and if you're honest with yourself and you sit in quiet contemplation, you can forgive yourself for the transgressions because it's been happening in your family for generations. And once you can do that, then you can begin taking the steps to solve it. And your parents will thank you. Your grandfathers from the grave will thank you. And your kids on some level, when they're teenagers, they'll still be crazy, but sometime they'll thank you when they get older, that's how you make the world better. You understand the patterns in your life that are keeping you from becoming your best version of yourself. And when you change the patterns in your life, you change the patterns of the world. Because think about it, the way you act in your life, you interact with people all day long. You have a relationship. And when you change the relationship to yourself, you change your relationship to the world and you make it vibrate at a higher level. It's this idea of generational trauma, this idea of holding someone's hand in the last 10 seconds and getting to be in that moment with them. I think I'm going to hold on to that forever. And how can it not bring you to your center? That's such a beautiful thing. I'm thankful that you shared that with me. Thank you for that. What do you still talk to her? What an amazing woman.
We're still in connection. She is very, very beautiful soul level. And, you know, that witnessing, imagine that the last 10 seconds of witnessing can change you forever. And this is the way we interrupt and disrupt and intervene. And this is the greatest intervention in breaking the pattern and getting us out of this victimhood, all of us as collective, I think. And I also have this feeling that your next book is coming, not in Course in Miracles, but Course in the Sacred, right? Something like that. I think you'll do a great job bringing that storytelling.
Yeah, thank you. I can feel it. It's people say it all the time, but when you sit down to write something, I think something writes through you. The same way when you have a beautiful conversation, or the same way the woman told you the story about being there and the emotion was transferred to you. So too, on some level, did you sharing that story with me provided me with a gift that I can have forever. And I think that's the creative process. And it's almost like a language in a weird sort of way, where words fail, emotions begin to build a form, and they can be passed on to people, even through cameras.
Yeah, that's the power of the energy and the connection and the being present in the moment. Yeah.
Have you taken on any sort of, have people come to you, or would you be willing to take on people as a mentor, Susan?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is part of my work as well. Yes, we're growing together. Absolutely. And thank you for asking that, George. I could speak to you another 7 hours, and I am aware of our time, and I really appreciate you. Thank you for your wisdom and your energy and your heart in everything you do. So blessed to be able to call you a friend in this space. And I think we need to do these conversations more often. Please come back as often as you like and you have time and capacity for it, because I really appreciate you. So thank you.
Pleasure's all mine, Susan. I love talking to you. You're an amazing human being. I'm so thankful to get to call you a friend. We should try to set something up on the regular, because this is a lot of fun. And I really think that we could explore some avenues that would bring a lot of value to people. So I'll be mindful of your time. I could talk to you as well for another 2 hours. Congratulations on everything you have coming your way. You have some incredible guests. I love the podcast. I love seeing the wins. I love when you get to share your stories, and I love the way you bring the best out of people. So thank you for doing that, and I'll let you go.
Thank you so much. And just before we let you go, please share, where can people find you online? I know it's the truelifepodcast.com, right? The truelifepodcast.com.
Yeah, it's actually truelifepodcast.media is the new site. And there's my LinkedIn. You can check in the show notes. My LinkedIn will be down there. And it's got a bunch of my podcasts. You can see me on YouTube. All my links will be down there. And I'm just super thankful. Thank you to everybody who's taken a moment to listen to the podcast. Thank you so much for everybody who's given me the kind words of appreciation or motivation or constructive criticism. I love all of it. So please keep them coming, and continue to watch Susan here. She's an incredible individual, and I'm looking forward to see what we both come up with next.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you as always. Thank you everyone for being part of this conversation, and hope you guys enjoyed it. And please join us again for more, and share your experiences. Drop them in the comments. Don't be shy, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.